On August 6, 2005, Brazil witnessed one of the biggest bank robberies in its history. So bold, so meticulously planned, but so complex it seemed impossible. But how did they pull it off?
Scriptic.
Chapter 1. The Perfect Disguise. This is Banco Central in Fortaleza, one of the branches of the Central Bank of Brazil. It's responsible for managing the nation's currency, monetary policy, and financial stability. This particular branch also served as a depository for large reserves of cash, including old banknotes that were scheduled to be withdrawn from circulation. The bank's vault is buried deep underground. It has reinforced concrete walls, several feet thick, heavy steel doors with advanced locking mechanisms, and a sophisticated alarm system. It was impossible to break into, at least if you wanted to get in through the front door. This is Antonio Josivan Alves dos Reis, who went by the name Alemo, used to be a farmer, but then started getting involved in small heists. Now he was ready to take on a bigger challenge. His plan was to rob the Banco Central without even stepping foot in the building. For most, it was an impossible target. For Alemo, it was the chance of a lifetime, but he knew in order to pull this off, he had to think outside the box. He rented a small commercial property in Fortaleza. It was a green building, and he added a sign out front with a logo that said Grama Sintética, Portuguese for synthetic grass. He purchased gardening equipment, a van, hired employees, and registered his landscaping company. At least, that's what it looked like. His actual plan? To build a tunnel underneath the city and dig his way into the bank vault. Ambitious, daring, and dangerously complex. This operation had taken months of precise planning to even get to this stage, and will require several more months of digging to complete it, with no guarantee of success. Of course, his landscaping employees weren't actual gardeners. They were engineers, electricians, and construction workers. It was the perfect disguise. Chapter 2. The Tunnel. The plan had been finalized and the team was ready to get started. They had soundproofed the windows with mattresses and carefully pinpointed the ideal location to start digging. From there, they dug 10 feet downwards before beginning the 255 feet long journey towards the bank's vault. Except for a slight upward bend to avoid a sewer pipe, the tunnel itself was almost a perfect straight line. It was about 4 feet tall and 2.5 feet wide, just large enough for one man to crawl through. To support the structure from collapsing, they used wooden beams to line the tunnel's wall. They used a generator to power the lights. To keep the air breathable in the confined space, they rigged up a rudimentary air conditioning system, and they even ran a phone line through the tunnel. The logistics of this operation were just as complex as the digging itself. Initially, they tried removing the bags of soil from the property under the cover of night, but this frequent activity began to draw suspicion from nosy neighbors. Realizing the risk, the crew changed strategies. They began dumping the soil into the backyard, slowly raising their garden's height by nearly 3 feet. The gang had a dedicated team working around the clock. They split into 3 groups, with vans discreetly transporting workers during shift changes. At the front of the tunnel, one man dug with a simple gardening shovel. Behind him, another member bagged the loose soil. A third hauled the heavy bags back to the entrance, where they were handed off to the service crew. After 4 months of straight digging, they reached the vault. Now, the final challenge was to break through the 4 feet thick, steel-reinforced concrete floor. Chapter 3: The Heist. The gang had timed their heist for the weekend of the 6th and 7th of August. That Saturday night, the gang made their final preparations. They broke through the vault's floor and emerged inside the central bank at around 6 p.m., right after the bank had closed for the weekend. Thanks to the intel they had received from their inside man, they knew exactly where to surface and carefully breached the floor behind stacks of money crates. This strategic entry kept them hidden from the security cameras and motion sensors. The vault was as large as an indoor soccer field, but only had 5 security cameras. Each camera was wired to a single screen that rotated between views every few seconds, which gave the men precious moments of invisibility. The motion sensors should have been installed along the walls, but were instead placed on the ceiling. The gang exploited this oversight and modified the room with wooden crates to shield their movements from detection. There was no rush. They spent 2 nights inside the vault, transferring the cash through the tunnel back to their rented property, and never triggered the alarm. When bank employees arrived the following Monday morning, they couldn't believe their eyes. By the time the police arrived, the gang was long gone, taking around 160 million Brazilian reais with them. As news of the heist spread, police officials addressed the media, scrambling to understand how such an elaborate crime had unfolded right under their noses. In an interview, Sabrina Albuquerque from the Fortaleza Civil Police said the following:
"This crime is something completely unprecedented, both in Fortaleza and Brazil. Digging a tunnel of this scale is something you would expect to see in the movies, but certainly not in a seaside town usually known for its pristine beaches. They've obviously been planning this for a long time. We have a team of 23 police agents investigating this crime, but we can't yet say where the gang was from or how many gang members there were."
The investigation would continue for years, with some members of the gang eventually being caught. The mystery kept surrounding Alamo. The brilliance of the operation remains a symbol of criminal ingenuity. The Banco Central burglary of Fortaleza is to this day one of the biggest bank heists in history. 3 years after the robbery, authorities had tracked down and arrested several members of the gang. Some cooperated, others vanished, but one name remained at the center of it all: Antonio Josivan Alves dos Reis, aka Alamo. He had orchestrated a crime so flawlessly executed that for a time he seemed untouchable. But in 2008, his luck ran out. He was sentenced to 80 years in prison. Alamo faced a long list of charges, including bank robbery, criminal conspiracy, and money laundering. Prosecutors presented a compelling case using recovered cash, phone records, and testimonies from former accomplices to tie him directly to the crime. Though locked away to this day, Alamo's legacy remains. The Banco Central heist of Fortaleza is still regarded as one of the greatest bank robberies in history, not just for the amount stolen, but for the sheer ingenuity of its execution. And despite years of investigation, one mystery still lingers. Where is the missing money?